Parenting your transgender teen. How do you support a teen through transition in a way that fosters self-love, confidence, and family connection? Today, we're diving into a journey that is deeply personal, transformative, and often misunderstood. The transition journey of a transgender teen and their family. My guest, Wendy Cole, knows this journey firsthand as a transition mentor and coach, and now podcast host. Wendy supports individuals and families navigating one of life's biggest shifts. Having transitioned herself at 67, she understands the emotional, mental, and physical aspects of this experience in a way few can. Wendy's mission is to humanize what it means to be born transgender and to guide both teens and parents with compassion and clarity. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for listening to Parenting Teens Advice Redefined. My guest, Wendy Cole.
Hi, Cheryl. It's so nice to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation very much.
Me too. I'm honored to have you here. This is such a subject that really can make or break a family connection, make or break a personal connection. And I think it's so important to have these conversations. And first of all, Wendy, talk about your mission, talk about why you're here, talk about what it is you want to do here for people.
Well, for parents out there, my life is a classic example of what not to do with your child. We'll start right off with that.
Yeah.
I know for fact that from age 10, when I told my parents that I was a girl, that didn't go well. I knew it was something because the way we're born, we immediately go into socialization with our parents and family. The minute the doctor says it's a boy or it's a girl, that's it. And the phrase you used is very appropriate, born transgender. That's how this happens. It's nothing parents did that caused us to do this. It's not a choice. And it's not a trend, and it's not something that all your friends are doing. This is something that happens in the second trimester of birth. Gender identity is formed in the frontal cortex of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens in the second trimester. Also at the same time, sexual orientation also happens in the amygdala of the brain. And so that's all well before the doctor, checks between the legs and says it's a boy or it's a girl. And just for further clarification, gender is between the ears, not the legs. That is just your physical sex that happened in that differentiation during the second trimester of birth. And by the time your child starts maturing, has friends, there are play dates, then the child starts school. All of this socialization from parents and from the extended family really takes on new meaning when the child starts school. They have their friends, they have their tribe that they see every day. And we inherently know, I knew that at age 10, telling my parents I was a girl was potentially a very bad thing to do.
Yeah.
I just couldn't hold it back anymore. It's such a powerful feeling. And it affects us all differently. Gender is not an absolute. It's not the same as sex, and it's not an absolute. Gender is a spectrum or a continuum. No one is 100% male or 100% female. We're all a blend with a preponderance toward one side or the other. And that's it. So by the time the child becomes, 10, 12, 13 years old, they know very clearly how they feel about who they are, how they identify. And nowadays, it's different from when I was a child. When I was a child, there was no internet, there was no social media, there were no cell phones, there was nothing about this.
Yeah.
And I couldn't talk about this with my friends. I had no idea how they would feel. And not being accepted, especially for a teen,
Mm.
not being accepted as part of the group, that's kind of like a fate worse than death.
Yeah. True.
So I held on to my secret. And then when I told my parents, we had five sessions with a psychiatrist in a psychiatric center.
Wow.
And after the last appointment, I was told, stop thinking that you're a girl. Stop telling us that you're a girl. Otherwise, we're going to have you committed and fixed.
Oh my gosh.
That was my promise of what would happen to me if I continued with this. What that did to me, I don't want that to happen to any other child. I had to repress everything. I had this big family secret to hide,
Mhm.
and there was nothing that I couldn't talk to my parents about it. I couldn't say a word. Otherwise, I'd be back at the psychiatric center and committed.
Oh my gosh.
And so I repressed this, and it affected my social life through high school,
Yeah.
all through from like seventh, eighth grade. And this this was a very powerful feeling because I in the sixth grade, Wendy was the most popular girl in my class. She was the prettiest girl. She was had wore the nicest clothes, and I told myself, even though a lot of the guys liked her, of course, but uh, I told myself if I could ever be a girl, that's who I wanted to be. I wanted to be Wendy. And that feeling never left me. I chose that name in the sixth grade.
50
I
some years
finally,
later.
I finally got to take it 60 years later, 60
Wow.
plus years later.
Wow. I would love to take parents through a journey, from the first conversations to finally you are who you are and you love who you are and you accept who you are. And maybe not everybody does, but at some point, I think it doesn't matter. But 67, wow. So can we start from the beginning? So if what sort of, I don't know, social circles, conversations, behaviors would a parent go, maybe we need to have some open dialogue here? Adversely, if parents are not paying attention, not paying attention, but not seeing this, but
Hmm.
their kid says to them, I feel like a girl or I feel like a boy. How does that conversation start? How does the parent have an open dialogue initiating the conversation? And then if your kid's initiating this conversation, what is your response? What is your best response? What are the questions you're asking, if any, at the beginning of this whole journey?
Um, the first thing, the initial response should be just very open and very accepting.
Mhm.
The worst thing you can do is, are you sure about this? That immediately invalidates their feelings.
Mhm.
This is a very powerful feeling that your child absolutely knows is not acceptable by normal heteronormative standards of society.
Yeah.
And especially nowadays with all the adverse publicity about it and everything else. Um, it's just not acceptable to society. So a parent who comes off with the statement of, "Oh, are you sure about this?" Or, uh, "You'll never have a normal life." Those are all the wrong things to say. Um, it's a difficult conversation because, again, the one thing I find that with most parents, like everybody else in society, they have no framework by which to begin to comprehend this
Yeah.
as a subject, and they also don't have the words or the language for it. So that's the first thing that they are going to have to do is do some research on their own. Um, I'm in the process of writing a book for parents that
Amazing.
will go through a lot of this, and I also published an article in PFLAG for
Mhm.
parents of transgender. And it does go through a lot of this. You just have to be absolutely open and accept this unconditionally.
Mhm.
The worst thing you can do is place conditions on the child, telling them how they should be, how they shouldn't be. That's not going to work either. They've gone to the point of taking that one step forward, saying, "This is how I feel." And I still remember the terror that I felt when I did the same thing with my parents. And I know that I repressed not only my gender identity and the fact that I felt like I was a girl, I
Mm.
repressed huge parts of my personality because of this. I couldn't be open with other people because if I was open with somebody else, like an adult or one of my friends, I would be rejected.
Mm.
That's how I felt. That was the beliefs that I had. And I formed these beliefs at a very early age, and they stayed with me all the way through my entire life. It's a very, the other thing that my parents did, which a lot of parents do, is LGBT. Well, that's all sexual orientation. No, it's not. The L, the G, and the B, that's sexual orientation. The T is gender identity.
Mm.
That's the other thing parents and most people in society, um, from that day that the doctor checks the anatomy and announces it's a boy or a girl, from that day forward, for most people, it's sex. Sex is male or female, when in fact, that's just the reproductive organ,
Mhm.
period.
Yeah.
Gender identity in the brain is where the feeling of being male or female comes from.
Yeah.
And that's how that happens. Yes, there are chromosomes and there's body chemistry and genetics and all of that. But you'll hear people talking about gender dysphoria.
Mhm.
All that really is the incongruence between what you feel in your mind and your body and how you're forced to live. The social roles you're expected to accept.
Yeah.
And all those social roles are part of the parenting unspoken language. Boys play with pickup trucks and toy cars and stuff, and girls play with dolls. My favorite toy was Dolly. I don't know where Dolly came from. And it was horrible the day my father came home and took Dolly away and replaced it with Teddy.
Oh,
And I screamed and I got spanked.
oh my God.
And that was that. And I mutilated Teddy the next day with my little paper scissors. And I got punished and a new Teddy. And that was it. No more dollies. My father wanted me to play Little League baseball. I wasn't interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I don't know what I was interested in. I just knew I felt different and I didn't want to go out and play baseball on a dirty, dusty Little League ball field. And I didn't want to do all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My parents did everything they could to try and socialize me the way they felt I should be.
Yeah.
And it didn't work.
And the impact.
The impact on me was profound.
Yeah.
All the way through high school, I had a limited number of friends, like 3 or 4 guys that I was friends with. That was it. I didn't date. I was afraid of girls. Simply because I figured, oh, they might actually figure me out and figure out what my secret was.
Yeah.
That's why I wasn't social. No such thing as going to proms or anything like that. And this continued all the way through college. In fact, I went to an all men's college, kind of like forcing myself to fit in, immersion therapy, as it were. I have to be one of the guys. I'm going to an all men's college. Well, that didn't work either. By my senior year, I was seeing a psychiatrist and I was determined that I was going to transition. You see, in those days, we still didn't have an internet. We still didn't have cell phones or social media or any of that. I didn't know really what was going on.
Yeah.
But apparently, I grew up in upstate New York, about 40 miles north of New York City. And it was still very rural at that time. It's not anymore. It became a bedroom community for Manhattan, actually. But that's where I grew up. So I had no idea what was really going on. But again, this was in the 60s and into the 70s. People like myself were actually forced to leave everything behind and live underground.
Oh my gosh.
You lived in Manhattan, you lived in San Francisco, and in either of those cities, and in California and in New York State and in many other states at the time, people like myself were arrested, thrown in jail, heavily fined, and names printed in the paper for appearing in public presenting as male or female differently from the way you were assigned at birth.
God.
That was all through the 60s and into the 70s.
Oh, that's horrendous.
And so between that and knowing how my parents felt, and that there was absolutely no one else I could talk to about any of this.
Yeah.
Cheryl, guess when the medical community recognized this? Because I found out when I tried the transition in 1970
Yeah.
that this was considered psychological with no treatment and no cure by the medical profession.
Oh my God.
Hmm. Gay people were also considered psychological with no treatment or no cure at that time as well. This was not recognized as how we were born. It's just a psychological problem. Well, gay people were changed, their diagnosis was changed sometime in the 1970s.
Mhm.
We were known back in those days as transsexuals. And another part of the community, cross-dressers,
Mhm.
were as transvestites. So, and both were considered psychological and deviant behavior.
Oh my God.
That didn't change until 2012.
What?
Yes.
Oh my
That's
God.
when that's when people who are born transgender actually got rights and recognition from the medical community as how we were born. It's now treatable by psychological therapy. So I highly recommend that parents not only have a therapist for their child, but also for themselves
Yes.
to deal with this.
Yeah.
And there are still therapists and people out there that will refer for um, conversion therapy. In 2015, my psychiatrist that I was seeing in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, wanted to send me to Johns Hopkins Medical Center for conversion therapy.
Mm.
I was shocked when I found out that Johns Hopkins was actually doing conversion therapy at the time
Yeah.
in 2015.
Oh
They
my
no
God.
longer
So,
are, but that's changed. But they were among the pioneers for doing sex reassignment surgery.
wow.
And they went from doing that to conversion therapy, which conversion therapy never worked with any gay people. And
Mm.
it definitely doesn't work with people like myself.
No, it just sounds even barbaric. Like
Hmm.
barbaric. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it does
And when
more
you
harm than
can't,
good.
yeah, yeah. And I'm really hoping that, you know, I'm sure this is absolutely not an easy process, journey, transition to take for parents or for kids.
Hmm.
However, parents who are listening, I hope you're really hearing the impact when the one or two people who are supposed to love you unconditionally
Hmm.
reject you, then who else would not reject me? Like, I can totally
Right.
understand that part of it. I've never walked in your shoes, but I'm thinking if a parent who, gave birth to me or adopted me or whatever is the one person in the world who I can count on to just love me, says no, reject, then why would I take a chance on anyone else on the planet?
Hmm.
Oh my goodness.
That's exactly the power of that.
Yeah.
And when, even with the most well-meaning parents, um, navigating the whole process of their child going from male to female or female to male is a very intense process for everyone.
Mhm.
For the child, they're exploring who they truly are. And when they start out, they don't accept themselves at all. I can
Mm.
honestly tell you, for 67 years of my life, I hated who I was. I did not like my life at all. Suicidal ideation was very common. And I couldn't talk to anybody. So the loneliness is intense.
Yeah.
And you do everything you can to immerse yourself in distractions, other activities that will distract your thoughts and silence your mind from telling you how wrong this is. And the other thing is your child is starting out, if they've said to you who they feel they are, but you haven't accepted it. You are trying to make them feel better, but understand they don't accept themselves either.
Yeah.
Completely do not accept themselves. And the amount of shame and guilt that that child feels is intense.
Yeah. As part of the journey, I understand, and not very much about, but hormones and taking supplementary hormones. At what point is, like, what is the process there? This is the first step. This is the second step. This is the third step that makes sense. That
Mhm.
is, and also age appropriate.
Right.
Can you speak to that?
Sure. For the for the most part, most surgeons would never consider any kind of surgical procedures on anyone that is still under parental care and definitely under the age of 18.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the best thing the thing that I would have loved, because when puberty started happening for me, that was horrible. My voice got deeper.
Oh yeah.
Things started happening to my body that I knew were not things that happen for girls. And I didn't want any of these things happening, but I had no choice in the matter. It just had to happen. And again, not only was I going through all that hormonal teenage years,
Mm-hmm.
but all the negative stuff associated with it, the things I didn't want to happen
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
And today, if a parent starts to go down this path with their child, there's several things that need to happen for the parents. The parents need to transition as well.
Mm-hmm.
This is a whole mental process the parents need to go through. The best thing that can happen for the child who is beginning puberty is they have to see, because the medical profession didn't fully recognize us or have the diagnostics for us
Mm-hmm.
to transition until 2012. The research into all of this basically really took off in 2012 as well.
Mhm.
So nowadays, there are puberty blockers that are quite effective, quite safe. And what it does is it just puts that whole process of the body changes during puberty, it puts it all on hold
Mm-hmm.
until the child is older. Could
Okay.
be 18, 19, 20, and decide, well, I've been on these blockers now for X number of years, and I don't really think I don't want to transition anymore. They can stop the blocker, stop doing that, and allow puberty to just happen. And it will
Mm-hmm.
happen,
Yeah.
just as it will happen in the late teens, just as in the early teens.
Mhm.
without any harm whatsoever. The advantage is, oh, your child who was assigned male at birth, and that's another key thing that's in the um, ethos at this point, going around in the social media and the news and all of that.
Mhm.
Um, the sex assigned at birth is based on the physical anatomy between the legs and has
Mhm.
nothing to do with gender and how the person actually truly identifies and feels. So, um, I wouldn't have had the voice deepening. I wouldn't have had the facial hair, body hair, all of that,
Mhm.
and the physical developments that happen as a result of testosterone.
Mhm.
Um, or for a child going from female to male, um, it would retard and slow down the breast development.
Right.
So in later life, if they transition, they won't have the need for this, whole mastectomy to happen to
Mm.
make them feel more
Right.
comfortable in their bodies.
Right.
Um, and the testosterone, I have seen this as well. It does a wonderful job of lowering the voice. I I went to the um, in Philadelphia. The Transgender Health Conference is held in the Convention Center in Philadelphia. And my first visit to that event, there were over 6,000 people there, which blew me
Wow.
away. I
Wow.
didn't know there were 6,000 people like me.
Wow.
Yeah, and I walked by this group, and one of my acquaintances was talking with this group of guys, and I'm walking by, and I'm looking, okay, group of guys. Wow, they all went female to male. You'd never know. The facial hair, the muscular structure, the hair on the arms, everything,
Wow.
and the deep voices. And okay, I get it.
Yeah.
But this is something that we as people are born this way and we need to do.
Mhm.
For teens, it's doubly confusing. They don't have the life experience yet.
Yeah.
Um, Teenagers are also in groups, and their social life with their friends is uber important.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
The one thing I have seen, and it depends on where you live and the region of the country and everything else as nowadays as to what's going on, but more often than not, your child's friends are going to be far more accepting
Mm.
than you would ever imagine.
Yeah.
Um, my my grandkids, their friends could care less about me. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Um, as far as names go, they called me Wendy. That was it, and that was fine.
Yeah.
But it's the parents have to go through transition as well. Anybody that stays with the person who is transitioning needs to shift their perspectives too. And that's what it is. It's a change in perspective.
Yeah.
I will look at any adult, be they a parent of a transgender person or anyone else, and say, if you have never looked in the mirror and questioned your own identity as male or female, I don't expect you to ever understand this.
Mhm.
It's a change in perspective is what is necessary.
Yeah.
And being open to accept this as a new possibility. Because I had one of the parents that I was talking with, she was explaining to me something that was not surprising to me. Her child, she would say all these things like you're so pretty, you look so nice, I love the way you look today, you're just a very pretty young woman.
Mhm.
Well, this 20 something person who's only been living full time for a year or two
Mhm.
still doesn't really accept themselves. So when the parent comes across with just this generalized, glowing recommendation of how pretty they are and how good they look and all of that, they can't believe it themselves. The
Mhm.
child can't believe it themselves
Yeah.
and
Oh,
doesn't
wow.
know how to interpret that from their parent.
Yeah.
Whereas um, if a parent says, "Oh, that top looks good on you," now that's much more believable.
Mhm.
So it this is the fine line parents are going to walk through this whole process is keeping everything that they say to the child believable for them
Yeah.
and
Well, that makes so
assuring
much
them
sense.
that they're accepted
Mhm.
without overdoing it and taking
Mhm.
it to that next level where the child is not really willing to go because they don't believe it either.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to do a lot of work personally to undo decades of socialization as a male,
Mhm.
decades of beliefs that kept me safe, kept my secret safe. I had to undo all of that. I had to mentally and emotionally transition as well as physically. The
Mhm.
physical part, to me, the physical part is just the window dressing.
Mm.
It's the emotional and the mental aspects of transitioning that make all the difference.
Yeah. Is there is there I don't know if I want to say a grieving process, but is there a grieving process for parents who not are losing a child, but are navigating the loss of what they thought life would be with the gender they thought their child was? And at the same time, if our kid can be open and honest and really have that, accepting conversation with their parents, they're now celebrating. And our parents, is it fair to say there's a grieving process? And what does that look like if there is, or would you call it something else?
Actually, no, it is a grieving process. Um, Parents, the minute that child is born, they are personally invested in their child,
Mhm.
and they have hopes and dreams of what their life is going to be like, what your child's life is going to be like. So all of a sudden now, your son is now saying he's your daughter.
Mhm.
And that's a huge difference. Or the daughter is now your son. Another huge difference.
Yeah.
And grieving, yes. Um, the last thing a parent should ever do is share that with the child.
Good. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah.
That just piles on the shame and the guilt and the feeling that they're being rejected.
Mm-hmm.
So the last thing you want to do is go down that path. It's a more of accepting them, assuring them that no matter who they are, no matter how they present, no matter how they feel they are, either a boy or a girl, it doesn't matter. I still love you. You're my child.
Mm-hmm.
That's the approach that parents really need to take. And that's a difficult thing to do because, well, the son that a father had. In my case, my father was looking for someone to continue the family name. He wanted a son more than anything and went to great lengths. In fact, um, my my parents um, my parents had me, and that was the end of my father's first marriage. His first wife had two daughters. So he left his first family to be with my mother, have me as his male heir. And
Mm.
again, there are no guarantees in life. You see how well this worked out.
Right. That's right. I'd
I,
love
I
to. Sorry.
I did get married. I did have a family, and it wasn't because of all the normal stuff that I went through that. In the 1970-71 timeframe, I tried the transition. And that's when I was taken by my psychiatrist at the time to a quarterly meeting of area psychiatrists in a hospital conference room where I was the case study patient.
Oh,
And I spoke for no more than about 3 to 5 minutes about my life and how I felt and all of that. And one of the doctors stood up, looked around the room, said, "I'll see you all next quarter," looked at me and said, "You're a freak. You should move to New York City and turn tricks like the rest of them." Again, I had no clue what he was talking about. None of this was public. It's
yeah.
not on social media. It's not out there for
Yeah.
everyone to see. Very different time. But yes, what I found out later, much later, about two years later, that doctor wasn't wrong. And that's when my psychiatrist told me it's a psychological condition, no treatment, no cure, and basically you're on your own. So I had been told my entire life by doctors and my parents, you're the only one who feels this way, which I knew was wrong.
Yeah.
By the early 70s, I knew that was wrong because there was Christine Jorgensen. 1971, Wendy Carlos um, did the soundtrack to Clockwork Orange, and she
Yeah.
transitioned.
Yeah.
I came to the realization that, yes, I could do this then, but only if I were a celebrity and had the means,
Mm. Yeah.
because it wasn't open for everyone, not in this society.
Wow.
So I started checking off all the heteronormative check boxes. I was told, you have a career? Checkbox. A wife? Checkbox. A house and a family? And you'll forget all about being a girl. No, never forgot it. Not for one day.
No.
It was with me from morning till night and even in my dreams. And that's how my wife found out about about me. I was talking in my sleep about being a woman.
Wow.
I had been married for a few years. We had the house, I had the career, we had the family, 2 kids, and we were off and running, and I couldn't take it. It was horrible, the stress, and it just came out in my sleep. So when she woke me up one night demanding an explanation, I told her everything, expecting to be divorced by morning, but no, we stayed together. She had her own reasons for that. And we did. We stayed together. I was married for 40 years.
Wow.
To let you know and to let your parents listening know, this does not go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was, it was November of 2014. I had everything set up, Cheryl. I was all set to kill myself. Everything was ready. And I believe the universe actually said, go check the internet one more time. And I did. I went and checked. And that's when I found out 2012, my diagnosis code had changed. There was now the WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, had succeeded in pressing the medical community to change diagnostic codes to now consider this to be treatable through psychological therapy, hormone replacement therapy, and any necessary surgeries. And there are no rules on surgery. There are no rules on doing any of this. For your child as a parent, for someone like myself, as I said earlier in this conversation, gender's not an absolute. It's a variant. It's varies. So I got a full dose of hardwiring as female during that second trimester. There are others who are born transgender that don't have that feeling that intensely.
Mm-hmm.
It still affects them, but not as constant. It's not as persistent as mine was. Mine was daily. And I was actually working as a contract IT person, doing work for corporations under contract. And I was working in Philadelphia. I couldn't go out and sit on this in the little park beside my building in the summer and the spring and all of that. The women walking by, a huge distraction for me, brought this all out. That's how I should be. So at 67, I told my wife, I said, this never went away. She said, I know. Much to her shock, to say the least. I don't know where this is going. I don't know what it's going to be like, but this is something I've got to do. I can't go on anymore. I almost ended everything, and I have to go and find a therapist. And that was the first thing I did, was I found a therapist, and I started therapy in January of 2015.
Wow.
And 6 months later, I was living full time as Wendy.
Oh. How did you feel? Like, was it like, I don't even know if you can describe, I bet, but can you describe
a complete rebirth? I discovered things about my personality that I never knew were there. It's that intense.
Yeah.
This was 5 years after I transitioned. My ex-wife looked at me and said, wow, you went from being asocial, we would have Christmas parties or Thanksgiving gatherings and it was all basically my wife's friends. that were coming to these, and relatives. None of mine were anywhere around. And uh, she would put these, big gatherings together. I would show up for about the first 10, 15, 20 minutes tops and then vanish and then pop in occasionally. I I hated being social.
Yeah.
Now I love it.
Oh my gosh.
Total opposite. I'll talk to anybody.
Oh, I'm so grateful for that one more check of the internet. I'll tell you that. This is, oh, you're so beautiful. Wow, this is
No.
incredible.
This is a very difficult thing for parents to comprehend and all. And it's one of the reasons why I actually started talking with people about this during my first week or two of living as Wendy full-time. And by the way, I didn't know anybody when I started. I didn't know anybody else who was transgender. I didn't even realize until about 2 months in or so that there was a large community.
Hmm.
And I'm actually glad that I didn't, for one reason.
What's that?
I didn't inherit or pick up a lot of the beliefs that others in the community share. The first and foremost is transition is difficult and takes a long time.
Mm.
If that's what you believe, that's how it will be.
Mm.
I didn't believe that. I didn't know what to believe.
Yeah.
I just knew how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
My parents had raised me to be very analytical, pros and cons for everything, analyze everything. That's not who I am.
Yeah.
I found out going through this that I could just let go and do what felt right.
Mm.
And going by how I felt worked out so much better, because going from living as a guy to living as a woman,
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what that would be like. I didn't even know at the time if I would like it. And this is what teenagers are feeling at that point.
Mm-hmm.
They know how they feel, but wow, once I take that step over to the other side, what's that going to feel like? What's that going to be like? How do I know? Well, you don't. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like you just do and you just be, and you
Yeah.
see how it feels. And that's what the child has to go through, is discovering that sense of being.
Mm-hmm.
It's a much more deep sense of self. I didn't have any self-acceptance until probably about March or April of 2015. I never felt good about myself at all for 67 years.
Yeah. Yeah. That's,
And
oh my gosh.
and through the first 3 or 4 months of therapy, what I focused on with my therapist was shifting my thoughts, shifting my beliefs, so that I could see that this was possible.
Mm.
And that's another thing that any child is going to go through. They don't have the life experience to do that and put the words around it, but that's
Yeah.
what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
Finding a new sense of self. So
Wow.
once I began to become very, very aware, self-aware, and realizing, oh yeah, I've got to change so many things about myself,
Mm.
and then started to accept myself, By the time I got to June of 2015, I was beginning for the first time in my life, the very first time, Cheryl, to ever feel any kind of self-love.
Oh,
That was the very first time. And my therapist, Stephanie, this was profound. At the end of it was an intake session, so I probably talked, and she was the first person that I had talked with in 4.5 decades. I didn't even talk with my wife about this,
mm,
not in any length whatsoever, because it was too upsetting for her, of course.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so Stephanie was the first person I talked to in 4.5 decades, 45 years of holding the secret and repressing. And
Okay.
I got through that, and it just felt so good. I poured my guts out. And I stood up, turned, and I said, I'll see you next week. And she just looked at me. What's your name? I know she asked me that question, having no idea what the answer would be, or if I would even say something, or what I would say.
Mm,
But what that told me was she accepted me. I
mhm.
snapped back, Wendy. I didn't even think. And I had been, as I said, I've been hanging on to that name since the 6th grade.
Wow.
Um, Summer of 2023, I was moving from Pennsylvania, where I lived, to Rhode Island, where I live now. And I called her up from the hotel that I was staying in while I was waiting for my apartment. I said, you realize you are the first person in 67 years of my life to ever accept me for who I am and how I feel about myself. She was the first person and not the last.
Mm. I'm so glad to hear that.
So, for any parents out there whose child is saying, I should have been a boy or I should have been a girl, believe them.
Yeah.
Um, don't diminish them. Don't overdo
Mm-hmm.
also, but accept and also understand too that the social roles that you had been raising them in for 10, 15 years
Mm-hmm.
and the expectations you had of them are all going to change.
Yeah.
And there is absolutely nothing you can do about that or should
Mm-hmm.
accept them. There's going to be, like maybe you had a son who now is your daughter and you used to have him mow the lawn. Well, girls can mow the lawn too. I'm not going
Darn
to be
right.
sensitive about it, but be sensitive to the fact that they're undoing their socialization at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So where that's normally the son's chore to mow the lawn, now she doesn't feel comfortable doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Accept it, be open to it, and make the changes.
Yeah.
There is a change that needs to happen within the family dynamic. A change in not only clothing and presentation and everything, but also the roles. And help that person who maybe used to be your son or your daughter adjust into new social roles that they themselves choose.
Yeah.
Don't impose on them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you make recommendations, make them very respectfully and make them very carefully.
Mm.
as suggestions, nothing that you have to do. And the other thing that I also see with parents that is problematic is within the heteronormative lifestyle, everything is about sex.
Mhm.
And sex is male, sex is female, sex is, the different roles and all of that. And this is not about sex. It's about who you feel you are and how you believe you are. And it's kind of like there's a great divide between male and female.
Mhm.
And there's all points in between.
Mhm.
There are women who, feel much more comfortable with some of the more masculine characteristics, and that's okay. There is a double standard in society. Boys who like to put on a dress and go out and play in the yard with the other kids, that's not
Mhm.
acceptable.
No.
But girl can put on a pair of jeans or whatever,
Yeah.
and oh, she's a tomboy.
Mhm. Yes.
So that's the double standards that we're
Yeah.
faced with as a society.
Yeah. So true. I feel like I could talk with you for hours. This has been transformational, like transformational for not just teens, but for parents who are really like need to walk alongside our teens and take the journey with them. And I feel like this is, the impact. And I'm sorry that your parents did what they did. And I'm sorry you spent 67 years feeling the way you did. But I'm grateful that you took that brave step and that you're finally feeling who you really are. And it's such a beautiful thing now.
Right. Physically, all of those negative thoughts, all of that repression, everything that I went through my entire life, it affected my physical health dramatically.
Mhm.
I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes by 38. My blood work always had problems in it. By the time I was 67, I don't think I would have lived to be 70.
Wow.
My blood work was terrible. It was all this stuff coming back with triglycerides and cholesterol and all the other fun stuff that comes back from that. And I was totally diabetic. And I was 70 pounds overweight because I didn't care about who I
Mm.
was. I didn't
Mhm.
care about what I looked like.
Mhm.
And that's the impact of this
Yeah.
on later years. Well, 3 years after I transitioned, my primary care physician looked at me and said, "What's going on with you? I'm going through your health records. Your blood work comes back perfect every time.
Yeah.
I'm taking you off all your meds. You don't need them anymore. And you're no longer diabetic. I'm taking you off all of that too.
Oh my God.
And you've lost 70 pounds."
Body keeps the score.
Yeah,
Wow.
all the
Wow.
all those thoughts that I was having, and that's the
Mhm.
thing that I learned going through this transition. I learned the impact of our thoughts and our emotions on our
Mhm.
physical health,
Yeah.
because the emotions are communicated to our bodies by neuropeptides come from the brain.
Mhm.
Other glands throughout the body produce chemicals, and every emotion that your thought patterns bring up are communicated to your body by your body chemistry.
Mhm.
And that chemistry is highly addictive. We're the best drug dealers we've got.
Yeah.
You can become addicted to depression, addicted to anxiety. You can also become addicted to joy too, and that's not necessarily a bad thing too, but it's all an addictive emotion.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
controlling those emotions, I no longer have all those thoughts. This has been a rebirth.
Yeah.
I've been living as myself now for 10 years, and it's been the happiest 10 years of my entire life.
I can't believe you're 77. You're kidding me.
No.
Okay, that's just ridiculous. Wow.
Most
Wow.
people put me in my 50s.
Yes.
And
Well,
I
when you
even
said
act
transitioned at 67, I'm like, what was that, yesterday? Like, there's no, oh my gosh. Oh, listen, I don't know, I love this conversation in such a way that I know the impact you're going to have for people. And I think that's the whole point for sure. And if you tell us where we can find you, Wendy, so parents are listening going, oh, that's the person I need to speak to. Where can we find you?
meetwendycole.com. That's the easiest thing to remember. Just meetwendycole.com.
And the name of your podcast?
The podcast just aired on February 28th.
Yay.
It's been, and I'm convinced that the universe put me on this path in 2015 to do this, because I started talking with people within the first month of living as myself and explaining what being born transgender means. So the podcast is the ultimate expansion of that, demystifying the transgender journey.
Yes.
And I've also formed a community around it. We meet monthly, and it's for people not born transgender, also known as cisgender within the community. It's for people not transgender to come together with people like myself and a few other transgender people that join me for open conversation with other people.
That's amazing.
Answer your questions, because there's so many people in the transgender community that are not comfortable with answering questions, feel they're being challenged, don't like it, whatever.
Yeah.
I'll talk with anybody.
If you have
And
questions, parents, this is where you need to go. This is where you need to go. Wendy, I am so immensely grateful for you today. I thank you for the work you do and the work you continue to do to support our kids, our humans. And I think we need to do a part 2 of this. But until then, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Parenting Teens Advice Redefined. Go see Wendy, go talk to Wendy, get into that community, get your questions answered, and we will see you next time.